and welcome to this week's episode of the Maine Challenge. This week we get to hear from LaTosha Brown. She was the keynote speaker in October at the Maine Women's Summit on Economic Justice that was held by the Maine Women's Lobby and the Maine Women's Policy Center. It was so inspiring and so important that we want to replay it for you here. LaTosha Brown lives in Georgia. She is the founder of Black Votes Matters. She is an organizer. She is a philanthropist. She is a consultant. She is someone who is a catalyst for change and lifts up us all through our hearts and our spirits, and who gets things done. Please have a listen to LaTosha and then tune into the Sounds Off about Build Back Better.
I want you to close your eyes and I want you to imagine with me real quick. And I want you to listen to this question with your heart. And my question to you is, what would the state of Maine look like if people were able to operate in the fullness of their power? What would this nation look like if human beings felt respected, valued, and honored? What would the world look like if we centered the love of humanity? Now open your eyes. Now I want us to do this one more time, and I want you to kind of prepare for this question. Just join me once again. I want you to close your eyes, and then I'm going to ask you another question. And I want you to hear the question with your heart. What would America look like without racism? What would America look like without racism? Now open your eyes. How many of y'all found that was a particularly difficult question? You know, the reason why I asked those questions, thank you. Thank you for being in this journey to kind of envision with me. The reason why I asked those questions, because those are the questions that we should be asking ourselves. Oftentimes we're kind of in this cerebral conversation around what policy we need. And yes, we need to have those conversations. But you know what's going to drive what that looks like? Those questions that I asked earlier. That is what is going to drive, because the truth of the matter is that until we actually envision something, it will never be brought into being. We will continue to go through this kind of hamster wheel of responding to things if we're not really centering what our solutions are in an actual vision. We will continue to respond to racism if we do not imagine a world without it. We will continue to respond to oppression and sexism if we cannot remember, if we cannot reimagine systems, right, that are literally centered in a feminist theory, that are centered in inclusivity. And so I'm raising this not as a point of a critique, but as an opportunity. That part of the way we have to really approach the work that we're doing, and even when we're talking about policy work, is one, it is going to require us to have a vision, or we will constantly be in a perpetual cycle of response. And we'll be responding to somebody else's limited vision. The truth of the matter is, all of us that are on here right now, that if our reference point is always the founders of this country, none of us would be here right now, because the founders of this country didn't believe that women actually had what was equality for women. Matter of fact, they didn't even believe that white men, if you didn't have land, had value. And they certainly didn't believe me as a Black woman and a person of color that they could even, they were so limited in their view that they couldn't even recognize my humanity or the humanity of my ancestors. And so I say that while, yes, there was a contribution of really a vision that laid the foundation of this nation, we know that vision was severely limited and severely distorted. And so what I am offering to you, sisters, women of the world, women of change, what I am offering to you is to go on this journey with me to think differently, so that we're not showing up in these spaces just as citizens of a nation or as taxpayers. We should start thinking of ourselves as founders of a new nation, that we're going to create this reality of what this nation could look like when people are able to operate in the fullness of their power. How would you show up if you were empowered to operate in the fullness of your power? You've tasted it, you've seen it. You know when you've had a superwoman moment or when you've had a Wonder Woman moment, you can feel it. You get up on the stage and you may say something, or you did something at work, or you wrote something and you like, oh, that was good. That was good. Or you say something and you give some advice and you're like, now that's good right there, right? You didn't need validation. It came from the deepest part of your power. And because it came out of your power, you recognize the value in it. And for a brief moment, you could see beyond even your own limitations. For a brief moment, you could actually see the literally superpower in yourself. Even beyond that could transcend your insecurities, that could transcend whatever circumstance, that can transcend. How many of y'all have been in a room with a bunch of men and you knew and you dropped this idea and some man would take it or repeat it, but you knew that your idea, right? You weren't even caught up in the taking of the idea. You knew that your idea changed the whole frame. And I'm saying that not as a point of ego, I'm saying it as a point of that is what it looks like when we operate in the fullness of our power. And sometimes our power looks like quiet silence. I had a grandmother that could move the entire room by sitting in a chair and just looking at you a certain kind of way. She could reorganize the whole family by not saying anything. It was like, Mama didn't say anything, so I don't know if we should do this. That is when you're standing in the fullness of your power. And so I just wanted to set the tone around where we are and what the work that we've got to do in terms of going forward. And so I always share what I call this V strategy. There are 5 V's that I'm going to talk about. But as I get ready to talk about that, I just want to remind you, ladies, that we are in a particular kind of moment. We are in a moment that we can actually continue to be transactional, or we're in a moment that we could be transformative. And so one of the things that I was doing today, right, before I do a talk, because I'm not physically there, I like to physically be there, right? I like to at least have some connection around the place or know something about the place. And so I was looking up stats in Maine. I wanted to look up, because I know this is a conference at the intersection of how we're looking at civic engagement, how we're looking at economic opportunity. And so what was shocking is I'll be honest, when I looked up the stats the other day and I was looking at the stats of Maine, I thought Maine was a wealthy state. And so there is an element of Maine being wealthy, right? But then I was looking at the rankings, and many of the rankings are similar to the states in which I work in, that I'm from, which is the South. And so I'm like, here's a New England state, which is in a region that's one of the wealthiest regions of the nation. And so I was looking at the outline. I was looking at, well, how did in many stats, Maine was 44th or 38th. And I'm not raising this as a critique. I'm raising it as it was actually shocking to me. And then I looked at it as one of the leading states. You know, one of the pieces that I saw, it was one of the, as you all know, I know I'm not telling y'all anything, it was a learning opportunity for me. That was one of the states that leads in manufacturing. That it was a state that had a strong history around that. And so part of that made me start thinking about why are we here? There's all kinds of reasons we can say why we're here, right? But the ultimate question is, where are we going? So while that was challenging, I got good news. And the good news is there's nowhere to go but up, right? That is good news. And I'm raising that in a context because my grandmother used to often say, and I'm a big grandmother's child. My grandmother would often say, where there is pain, there's great possibilities and promise. And so we need to actually see this moment in Maine, right? And where you all are at this moment in this world's history. in this nation's history of the question is, how do we do a couple of things? How do we create a culture that we are literally creating a vision together of how we're going to think about Maine differently and move Maine differently? If there's anybody to do that, if Maine is going to be changed, it's because of the women. I'm telling you, there's enough evidence to state that if the women, right, are not ahead of this helm, it will not happen, y'all. Not because it's not possible, not because it's not great men out there, but if they could do it, they would have done it by now, right? So I think that the opportunity exists where we can literally transform. COVID came in a way. And I'm sending love out to each and every one of you. I don't know how you've been impacted or if you've been impacted directly with COVID, but I just want to take a moment to acknowledge you, to acknowledge if your family has gone through it, acknowledge if you've gone through it yourself. We are here in this moment experiencing the largest global health pandemic in our lifetime. And many of us have been impacted in extraordinary ways. So I just want to just stop and acknowledge that and send you love. For those of you that have been negatively impacted one way or the other, and your family by that. So I send my love and heart around that. But I also want to say, what is this question around what did COVID come to teach us? And how does this have anything to do with this conference? It has everything to do, because part of what COVID did is COVID did a couple of things. One, it forced us to slow down and stop. Two, it forced us to actually deal with, or at least for a brief opportunity, to look at everything differently. I literally was in my house that I bought in 2007, right? And I feel like I just moved into my house. I start noticing things in the walls. I was like, wait a minute. I didn't know this room had this. Wait a minute. I've been treating my house almost like a hotel. And so sitting in the room, even in my office, I'm sitting in my office. I was like, no, this isn't practical. Let me do this because of this. And so I made my house, in this process of COVID, I've transformed my house basically into a home. Well, it's been a home, a hospital, a school, all kinds of things, right? Right. But literally to slow down and actually have to sit in it forced me to see some things that I weren't able to see, including the wall that needs to be painted and the room where I said I was going to get curtains 20 years ago that I never got curtains for, right? And so all of those things, that is one piece. The other piece, though, I think that COVID came to teach us is how interdependent we are and how we need each other. That at the end of the day, my health care, I can have excellent health care, but your health impacts my health and my health impacts your health. And collectively, if we're unable to actually see the collective vision around, we can create all kinds of artificial constructs that we want, from race to gender, all these other things that we want to create. But the bottom line is humanity is connected, like it or not. We cannot survive, thrive, and live without each other. That's just factual. And so that in many ways, and then the third and the final thing that I lift up with this is that it also is forcing us to relook at every single system. Many of us even met our partners and our children for the first time. We were like, wait a minute, I didn't know your learning style. I didn't know, thank God for teachers, right? But many of us really were forced to sit in those things that we've been able to just kind of write off. And so I think it's really important for us to really think about reimagining this moment as a moment for us to do a reset and to reimagine. And so those 5 V's, I'm going to start with the first one. The first one is V for vision. What is your vision for Maine? Individually and collectively. And so part of what happens often when I ask that question, people will start a vision based on what currently exists. I'm saying that I'm giving you permission to radically reimagine. You can abolish, change, shift, eliminate, create brand new systems. Do you all remember once upon a time where we didn't live with this? That there was something like a cell phone was the size of a big old bag, if you were lucky to have one, and it was $2,000. Right? Every single body, every person you know. We went to Disneyland this past weekend and we couldn't even get on rides without a cell phone. I was like, well, how do they know we have a cell phone? They was like, because everybody got them. I was like, well, okay. The bottom line is things have shifted because the way that we communicate has shifted because someone envisioned something that did not exist, that was different. And I'm offering this to you all, that as we're thinking about even public policy and we're thinking about economic interventions, it can't come at the expense of us really just responding to what already exists. Yes, there is one component to that, but we have to radically reimagine every single system. You know, when I think about, here we are in a time period where we have the technology has increased productivity to so much that we've generated wealth, that so much that what we're looking at right now, you're looking at an individual on the way of being a trillionaire. Now, I like just think about that. Why is it that we've created a system that people are able to make so much money that they can just take a joy trip to the moon, but people who are working every single day can't pay their rent? Something is off. I'm not mad at the person going to the moon, because I probably would like to go to the moon one day myself. But the bottom line is that on some level, we have to recognize that something is out of whack when we literally have an economic system that allows others to really set the context and the strategy for the rest of the world. Like, it should not be that basic needs are met because of benevolence or funding. Why can't we just create an economic system that the basic needs are met? And then, yes, make your money and go play and go to Mars and let's do those things. That's fine. But at the end of the day, what is so, and part of this, ladies, is because we've got to really recognize there are a couple of things. One, we've got to really understand we're in a narrative war. That if to hear it tell, I don't know if you all remember, some of us years ago, where the person who actually broke America was the Black woman on welfare. That was a narrative. When in fact, if you took all one, it was not, it was not only was it distorted and it was a lie, but the truth of the matter is there were more white people on welfare, white women, than Black women. So one, it was misstretched. And if you put everybody who had received some kind of welfare, right, that would not even touch the tax break from one company like an Amazon. But I also want to reimagine, how can I create a world that I can have stuff, that I can work in a ways that are healthy and wholesome, that I create systems that my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren don't have to work themselves to death so that they can work themselves to the bone till they get 65, like my grandmother that had to leave her retirement early and was bedridden for the rest of her life and never could enjoy a single day of her retirement. What kind of life is that? We don't have to continue that. And so I'm raising this in the possibilities of the kind of world we can co-create together. And yes, we can co-create that together. And you all can co-create that with Maine. There is nowhere else but up. Can you recreate economic systems in that state? The beauty about Maine is it's small enough that I do think that it could be a model. There are systems that could be a model for the rest of the nation and ultimately the rest of the world. And so just like you had a few men, like the bottom line, let me take America. Part of the reason why I love the American Revolution, and I know I'm getting ready to go a little bit over, but I'm going to end it after this. You know, the American Revolution, I actually love the American Revolution. I love the story behind it. I love the thinking behind it, although I'm really clear about the distinctions of the hurt and the harm that happened, including to my people. But there's something really powerful in, you know, part of what the story that gets missing is that part of it, you had a group of white men that did not come from royalty. That we know that England was a monarchy and there was a system of aristocracy, right? And so there were these white men that said, wait a minute, I ain't never gonna be a duke or earl or king. That's not my bloodline. I'm forever cut out of that. I'll never be in that, right? And so as a result, I will never be able to enjoy the fullness of the pursuit of happiness because I don't have that bloodline. Possibly I might marry in, maybe I might get a duke or earl because I did something, but for the most part, that's not that opportunity has been shut off from me just because of who I am. And as a result, what I am going to do is I've got this vision. How about we can create a whole nother nation that is separate from the monarchy, that allows me to be a king of my own destiny, that allows me to be able to create a whole nother economic system. Alexander Hamilton, to help me to create a whole nother way of looking at creating political governance systems. John Adams, George Washington, that did not exist. And so I'm putting that in context, whatever critique you may have on it, the bottom line, that was some good stuff for them. I'm saying we have the same ability to recreate and think about this ain't working for us. Let's think about new systems, a new economic system. Let's think about new systems of how we do education. We know it's not working. And we keep trying to fix that which doesn't work, when it may be calling for us in this moment to shift the frame and the paradigm, to be different. But that's going to require us being visionaries and not just responders. Although there is a need for us to respond in the moment, we often have to be putting and testing and not be afraid to fail. It's almost like sometimes those of us who have good intentions will get stuck in a quagmire that says, that may not work, that may not work. You know, if you know the story of 409, it was a 409th formula that now became the $1 million. That means a 408 failures. And so it is important for us to also give the last three things that I said. I say this about Black women all the time, but I think it's important for us to think about this for ourselves. That it is important for us to give grace to each other. That as we're doing this work, that we're all living a human life. This is a really challenging space for us. And so do we give grace for each other for our understanding? Do we give grace for each other around coming from our different backgrounds? Like, are we in a space? Now it almost seems like now we have a disagreement, and all of that means that we got to choose sides. Which team you on? The right side or the left side, right? Instead of literally being able to give each other's grace. The second thing is, are we creating space for each other? That in our work, are we creating space for those voices that have been marginalized, or those voices that we need to hear and bring to the table? And then the third thing, are we setting the pace? That sometimes setting the pace means being the outlier. It doesn't mean doing the most practical piece. It means sometimes being extraordinary. Do you know how, like nobody thought, if you read the story about Steve Jobs, at Apple, nobody thought that folks were going to give their iPods to listen to music and give all of that and then have everything on one phone. They thought it was cool, but this is the standard now. And so I think that it requires us, in setting the pace, doesn't mean that you just fall in line with whatever exists. Sometimes that means you're the outlier. That means you have to pull away from the crowd, which also makes you a target, but that's part of the process. Well, the first thing I did right was the day I started to fight. Keep your eyes on the prize and hold on, hold on, hold on, hold on. Keep your eyes on the prize and hold on, hold on. I wanted to end this portion of the talk in that way because I think it's important for us to always be grounded in spirit and recognize that everything that we do, it's not just about policy, it's about people. And it's the spirit of humanity and reclaiming the spirit of humanity that's going to transform the world. It won't be just multiple transactions. When we believe, things will change. And when we believe, we will show up differently in our jobs, in our homes, in our places. And so I offer to you that we stand in the fullness of our spirit, of our human spirit, around how can we transform this world, using our vision, shifting the paradigm of what a victory looks like, using our voice, literally centering our work and our values, and using the voting as a tool, not as a way to further marginalize people, but as a tool of the promise of possibilities. And with that, I'll stop right there because I know we're going to open up for questions.
So, Congress has passed the traditional infrastructure bill. Yay, lots of money for roads and bridges and something new, broadband. Awesome, I'm all for it. Yay, let's get that investment going. But here's what I'm really thinking about. I'm thinking about the piece that they didn't do. You know, Build Back Better. Don't you just love alliteration? Or what they call it, the human infrastructure bill. That makes me feel strong, like a bridge. Here's what I'm worried about, is that it's not gonna happen, that they've already been negotiating it away. But here's how I'm feeling. I'm feeling a little tiny bit hopeful, a lot anxious, and really mad at Republicans and moderate Democrats. Jared Golden, are you listening? So here's why I'm really, really mad. See this pencil, this accounting pencil? This only comes out when Congress is dealing with human beings, people, you and me, and what we need to thrive and to survive. There is no accounting pencil that comes out when the military budget is passed, even though it includes a $1.75 trillion boondoggle in F-35s. Or they don't pull out the spreadsheet to look and see how the United States compares, that we actually spend more money on the military than the next 10 countries combined, including Russia and China. And oh, by the way, all those other countries, they also provide healthcare for all their people. No, we don't pull out our pencils then. Why is it that the pencils and accounting sheets are reserved for us? Why do you pull them out only when our lives are at stake? When you might actually help us by taking the money that we give you in our taxes and reinvesting it in us. In universal pre-K for 3 and 4-year-olds, for a child tax credit that actually supports people who are having children and ensuring our future, for older Americans who get the dignity of actually being able to hear something by hearing aids being included in Medicare, by providing affordable housing for millions of Americans that they might not only have a house, but actually a home, and dealing with climate change that's going to kill us all if we don't get on the stick. Why is this where all the questions and doubts come up? What is wrong with you, Congress? What is wrong with you, Jared? Now you want to bring out pencils and spreadsheets? No. This is when you step up. This is when you say, this is what I fight for. Everyone deserves respect and dignity and support. Where meeting the basic needs of Maine people and people across this country is a bottom line that will not be crossed, not a political football or fodder for a different conversation. That is what we need. We will no longer build our economy and take care of our most vulnerable on the backs of unpaid or underpaid women and people of color. That's the promise of Build Back Better. That is the promise of reshifting how we think about what makes us safe, about what makes us a great country. We have the opportunity to do that with Build Back Better. We have the opportunity to invest in our people. And you don't like the gimmicks and tricks, Jared? Well, then fix them. And you better make sure that you use that same damn standard when you're looking at military budgets and tax breaks for the rich. I am holding out a teeny bit of hope that Congress, including Jared, is going to come to its senses and use this incredibly pivotal moment in history to not go back to what is familiar, but to use this opportunity to help us understand what infrastructure is really all about and what really keeps this country going. People, families, people and families who need support right now. People and families who are hungry for a government that works for us and not against us. That is what is included and the start in Build Back Better. Come on, courage up. You can do this. Pass this thing.